When you go to the gym and you build strength, you get stronger in the gym, and then you leave, you stay strong. You don't.
Right.
In the meditation practice, the skills that we cultivate on the pillow, we get to keep when the bell rings. The goal is not to become really like a great meditator, it's to become a great human being. Concentration is the skill, the fundamental skill that leads to performance excellence in all endeavors. So as you can cultivate the skill of concentration, you will get better at everything that you do. Husband, father, coach, entrepreneur, every hat that you wear, you'll be better at it if you train the common denominator in all your roles, your mind.
Welcome back to the Medicin podcast. My name is Mimi, and I have my love, my king here with me.
What's up, everybody? This is Chase. Occasionally in life, you come across somebody, you cross paths with someone, and immediately you got to get them on a podcast. And that is what happened with Michael Holt. So we are really excited today to welcome Michael to the Medicin podcast.
Happy to be here, man. Great to see you guys again.
Yeah, it's good. It's going to be a good conversation. So the first question that we ask every guest on the Medicin is, what do you love in your life? What aspect of your life do you love so much that you wish you could gift it to every human?
Vitality. I don't even have to think about it. The connection that I feel to my body and the strength and power that I feel in my body.
What maybe unpack a little bit the term vitality, what that means to you, and maybe kind of the journey you've took to get to that definition.
Yeah, I think that I have the lived experience of not feeling vital and not feeling healthy, but not really knowing that, just feeling, I don't know, like the standard American experience of not really enough energy to get through the day, not really enough mental clarity to feel creative, not really enough concentration power to prevent my mind from creating problems in my life, not feeling strong and confident in the felt sense of my body. And my life, my work, my passion has been cultivating vitality within myself. I know what it feels to live depleted, and I know what it feels to live full. And I'm on a mission to share this experience with more men, because I feel like the more men find their spine, find their breath, find their balls, and find critical thinking and become sovereign in their being, the less problems we're going to encounter as a culture.
Dunking
So good.
already. Let's come back to this. We're gonna get more into vitality and some of the specific work that you do here in a few minutes. But maybe if you can, and you've hinted at it already, give a little detail on what you do in the world today, and then we'll get into your story on how you got there.
Yeah, so I work as a health practitioner. That's an intentionally vague term because it's really difficult to define my work. I have a lot of tools in the toolbox, have a degree in psychology. I've done a deep dive into meditation as a skill-based, formal practice. I'm a martial artist and a martial art teacher. I've gone through the Czech curriculum on the holistic health side. I've done a course of study as a shamanic practitioner. And it all just kind of blends into meeting somebody where they're at and suggesting holistic lifestyle interventions that they can leverage to feel healthier and happier. I didn't set out to work with specifically men. That's just the way the cookie crumbled. Obviously, I'm a man. I have a controversial opinion that men and women are not the same. And encounter problems that I don't know how to be with, or that it's not been my direct experience. So I will have a consulting company where I work with individuals. I work with a few organizations, and I have a men's group that I've built where I'm right now in the middle of a 12-week men's course that I'm teaching. And I also offer men's retreats a couple of times per year, residential retreats.
Very cool. Yeah. Wide. Yeah. When I was on your website, just
take a look at the badges and certifications on Michael's website. It's nuts.
It's a crazy amount of knowledge and tools in your toolbox, which is great. That's honestly like what I think MDs should have under their belt. When they're giving people medical advice, it seems like it should be, in a perfect world, more robust than just, and I say that, with an asterisk. I know it's not easy to get through medical school. Oftentimes it's like the hardest thing that you'll ever do in your life as a physician. But I do think that there is a huge need for people who are giving medical advice to understand past the anatomy and physiology and medical procedures, pharmaceuticals, this and that and the other. And for someone like yourself that has this wide bouquet, this cornucopia of knowledge and wisdom and lived experience, I think that you probably have a much more, I would say, nuanced and holistic approach to helping someone. And it's incredible.
And I agree with you. I just want to say quickly, there was a time years ago where I was thinking maybe I wanted to go to graduate school. And I sent out some applications. I got into some programs, and I was going to consider maybe marriage and family therapy or a master in social work. But I just had to confront this feeling in my gut that it was like, no, it's not it. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. What do I want? I want to further my education. That doesn't mean I have to go to graduate school. It means I develop my own graduate program. So I just went all out on courses of study that I was passionate about with no real idea about how I was going to combine them. But that, just follow what you're passionate about, and then it all coalesces in time.
I want to rewind a little bit. You mentioned in your first answer, what it feels like to not be vital or not to have vitality. And you explained kind of a milieu of what you experienced, but what was going on in your life up until that point that kind of got you to that point where you didn't feel vital at all?
Yeah, I think that there was a whole bunch of emotional trauma that I was unaware of, and it was dictating my course of action in the world. I was suffering with depression, and I was medicating that depression with drugs and alcohol, mostly alcohol. And, I would get a head full of booze and then get myself in trouble with the cops. And then that would create a whole nother array of life problems that would cause more stress that I wouldn't know how to deal with, piled on the stress I already had that I didn't know how to deal with. And life was just becoming quite overwhelming. I didn't have any love for the man in the mirror. I didn't have a strong relationship with myself or even know that really. And it seemed to me like my mind had a mind of its own, and no matter what, I couldn't seem to wrangle it or govern it or prevent myself from getting into trouble. I mean, I got locked up like a whole bunch of times. And I was living on the East Coast in Philadelphia at the time, where I'm born and raised. And, I got in enough trouble eventually where I was like, this isn't just going to resolve itself. It's not just going to go away. I got to figure this out. I got to get a hand on this because I'm 22 years old, but the future does not look bright if I don't make some significant changes. And so I started, I had been an athlete, in my younger years, and then I lost touch with competitive sport, and a big part of me felt empty, I guess. But I got myself back in the gym. I got myself fit again. And that was only, the surface. But that led me into an exploration of meditation, and like a real rigorous, deep exploration of meditation. And I've had the good fortune to find some good teachers, and I explored a passion in martial art, and found the Czech curriculum. And I just went on this long journey that I'm still on and always will be, of understanding myself at deeper levels and getting right within myself and learning how to love myself. And when I look at where I was and where I'm at now and where I can feel that I'm going, I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't claim to have it all figured out, but I know what it's like to be in the dark for real. And I know what it's like to get out of the dark, and I know the way out. And so that's what I'm trying to share with people.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm curious for you, and I feel like this is the case with many who start a healing journey of some kind. It starts with physical wellness, but even upon making progress through your own physical wellness, whether that be through movement or through nutrition, oftentimes there's another call to action or adventure as it pertains to inner wellness around spirituality, or maybe it's your emotional health or your psychological health. What did that look like for you? At what point did you realize that there was more than just your physical body that required some up leveling?
So I was raised Irish Catholic. I went to Catholic school. That's pretty common in my neighborhood in Philly. It's not to suggest that my family was very religious. It was just part of our culture. We went to church Sunday, but no one was thumping the Bible at home. And then I got a little older, around 17, 18 years old, junior, senior in high school, start thinking like, looking at the priests and the nuns and the teachers, where formerly they were like priests and nuns, but you start to see them as people, act just people, and you start wondering about these beliefs that you never questioned before. And, long story short, I just kind of came to a conclusion pretty early in my life that this isn't answering the questions that I have, the deeper questions that I have. This is, I'm not satisfied with what I've been taught here. And I'm not confident that anyone who's teaching me has really done a deep contemplation on whether or not they believe what they've been taught. And so at that point, I started to read, like militant atheism was pretty popular then. Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. There's a French thinker named Michel Onfray. And I started to read all this stuff, and I started to get kind of angry and fired up, like, yeah, this is all bullshit. Fuck this. Yeah, I like to. And I walked that path for a little while. I think you could call it a period of radical deconsecration, where everything you've been taught, you just start to reject. But then, like I said, my life became quite complicated and quite chaotic, and my emotions were difficult to be in and be with. And I felt called to the practice of meditation, because life was, it had gotten so bad that it was like, well, meditation can't make it any worse. Right. The very least can't make it worse. This is like, I need some help. And if this will help, I'll try it. And I was attracted to meditation and Buddhism because it's very practical. And there's no requisite for a belief in a higher power or anything. There's no belief required. It's just the practice. And then through the practice, speaking from my own experience, but I think it's common, you start to reopen yourself to the possibility that there are forces at play here that defy logic and defy the human mind's capacity to really understand. And you're pulled into the mystical world, but the real mystical world, based on your direct experience, not religion, which is a filter over the mystical world, which is somebody telling you what your experience is or should be. But so I guess to circle it back and answer your question, that is when the possibility started to emerge for me that this is a mystery, that I don't really even know anything at all about where I'm from, where I'm going, or what I even am. And that's okay. That there's more to it than meets the eye, and perhaps I am more than just this body and this mind.
Yeah, that seems like a really common, we've had this question come up with other guests, and people just offer this information freely in their story. Like, you get to this point where you realize that there's definitely way more than I've been taught. There's way more than I ever thought. I will never know all of the answers, but somehow, like, even that itself is somewhat comforting. Like, this feeling that, like, I am so minute and infinitesimal, but I'm also like part of the grand cosmos. And you realize that there's so much more that you'll never know, but it's like this okay feeling. And it's almost like comforting, at least for me in a way. It's like, it's all good. I'm never going to have all the answers, but doesn't mean that I'm going to stop searching for them.
Yeah, it's very liberating to admit, really, that you don't have any idea what's happening here.
Yeah,
it's our fixed views. It's what we know that is the root of our suffering. And when we start to let go of what we know, we suffer less.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious how this translates into, the work that you're in now, and men's work specifically. Was it suffering that you were able to identify in the community of men at large that triggered this passion for getting into the work? maybe take us through a little bit like what you were picking up on. And obviously you had context through your own healing journey, but what you were picking up on in the modern man that prompted this spark for you to begin showcasing these things that you've learned and really helping people.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was a little less of like observing the modern man and wanting to save him, and more just focusing entirely on myself only and my own well-being and my own healing. That matures, they inevitably matures into wanting to be of service to other people. So I think a mistake that a lot of individuals make is that they have these grandiose aims to save modern man, or to save the relationship between men and women, or to crumble societal hierarchies that are unjust. But my mission and my message is to start small.
Yeah.
In the glass, get yourself together. Really. I mean, come to a place where you authentically love, respect, and revere the man in the mirror. Then you have something to share with the world. But until then, focus on yourself.
Yeah.
So I guess, to answer your question, one of the things that I seek to share is that I'm on a mission to make meditation badass again. I think that there's an unfortunate connotation with contemplative practice that it's like you need to have a man bun and you need to be kind of weepy spiritual type dude. And a lot of type A, quote, tough guys who think of themselves as strong, they say, well, that's not me. But the origins of meditation amongst masculine populations was like the warrior's work, the real warrior's work. And by the way, I mean, my challenge for anybody is that if you think this is like namaste, hippy dippy, airy fairy, then try it. Fruitful meditation practice, which I view and teach as the cultivation of specific skills, is not necessarily relaxing. It can be as those skills start to develop, but in engaging the practice, you will need strong determination, you'll need discipline, and you'll need heroic effort. It's not people say it's Zen or it's super peaceful. That's not my experience initially. As you start to be able to be more intentional with your state and your mind, then you can cultivate a state of peace. But you have to learn how to do that, and that takes work. So I guess what I want to share is that, unfortunately, modern man maybe thinks he only has two options: to be a tough guy, badass, or a spiritual type, to be hard or to be soft, to be sensitive or to be mentally tough. But I am inviting individuals into the consideration that you not only can be, but you must be both of those things. That's what I call Savage and Saint.
Yeah, perfect segue, because I want to get into the name, the meaning behind the name, and then what your ethos are, because this is your business title, Savage and Saint, which is beautiful. And so I definitely want to unpack the meaning of the name, and then a little bit about kind of what that integration of the two can look like.
Sure. So, Savage and Saint, that's the duality of man. This is, it's basically a new name on an old classic, yin yang. But the savage communicates this relentless determination to improve, to persevere, to conquer, to strive forward in spite of all obstacles, and to achieve the objective. That's in us. That's in all of us. We have that, and we can foster it. We can grow that capacity. But that capacity on its own is not enough. And, I've worked with a lot of highly successful individuals who they're so savage in their need to accomplish that they've lost the capacity to abide peacefully and unconditionally lovingly accept themselves and the world exactly as it is right now, in spite of all of their perceived flaws about themselves and the external world. It's the capacity of the saint to just take a long exhale and smile and recognize that actually this is beautiful. Nothing has to change. And when you when you can abide at the center point between those two extremes, your being is infused with this energy that you can then channel into the pursuits that you find to be meaningful, but they're no longer, your self-worth is no longer tied up with their accomplishment, because you recognize that what I'm really after is freedom. Freedom is available always and only right now. So you taste that fruit, and then you go out into the world a free man, and your presence becomes medicine. But as a savage and a saint, you are equally capable of demonstrating your strength as you are of appreciating a flower, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
You don't have to become a spineless nymph frolicking through the meadow, but you also don't have to be a unconscious barbarian dragging your knuckles around, breathing through your mouth. You know, for a man to reach his fullness, in my view, he must be practicing at the extremes of savagery and saintliness and living right in the middle.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, the word that comes to mind when you're explaining this is like fully integrating all the potential aspects of self that could have been discarded or let go of at some point in their life. Maybe as a child, they had a softer side. Like I know Chase speaks to this a lot. I'll let you say for yourself, but it seems like a lot of men are early on in life are taught, and women too, to be honest, that these softer sides, can be discarded, and you're going to get through life just fine if you have the savage aspect down, basically. But you hear from a lot of men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s that have done the savage thing, and they still don't feel fulfilled in life. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's not only do they not feel fulfilled, but the people around them who love them don't feel their heart, because they're so mission driven that they've forgotten how to stop and smell the roses. I mean, literally and metaphorically, they're not actually there. Their eyes are always on the horizon, and they've outrun their supply line. So a man like that will achieve the thing. The problem is, by the time he does, he'll be all by himself. And another point worthy of consideration, especially nowadays, is that Chase and I are from a similar era where maybe we were encouraged to abandon the saintly side, boys don't cry kind of a thing. But nowadays, it's the opposite. Nowadays, we want soft little boys and harmless men who, are not toxic.
Right.
So, yeah, balance is critical. And like I said earlier, an individual who is balanced and a culture of individual men who are balanced, who are strong but connected to their heart, cannot be coerced.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in the business of coercing people, I would not want men who are savage and saints.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, as I've gotten to know you a little bit and looked into your work, I went back to my notes on a book called Iron John that I read a while back, and I'm reading my notes, so I didn't quote the book perfectly, but I'm going to read a little section of my notes because it reminded me of you, and I want to get your thoughts here. And while we're kind of on this topic, the author is a poet. His name's Robert Bly. He says the modern obsession with making childhood a cocoon of light closes children off to sources of power. Addictions and psychological disorders mirror society's inability to accommodate the dark side. New Age thinking about harmony and higher consciousness holds a dangerous attraction to naive men, whereas mythology beckons us to enter fully into life with all of its blood and tears and joy. The way we achieve full realization of ourselves is to focus on one precious thing, an idea, a person, a quest, a question, and the decision to follow it at any cost. That is the sign of maturity. When we make a clear choice, the king inside us awakens and our powers are finally realized.
It's beautiful, man. Yeah, and that book was written, I believe, well, I don't know. I wanted to say
it's like mid-90s, early 90s, maybe?
Even maybe a few years earlier than that. I think it was very popular in the 80s. There was like a renaissance of men's work, and that was like the... But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm reading a very interesting book now called The Coddling of the American Mind. I'm nearly finished, but it's talking about this pandemic of safetyism, of trying to make childhood harmless. and treating children, especially young boys, as if they're very, 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 very fragile.
Right.
Lots of varies.
Yeah, but they're not, they're not.
Yeah.
And dangerous things happen when young people, but especially young men, grow up thinking that they're fragile. So yeah, I love the quote that you shared. What particularly stood out to me was this necessity of like finding a thing, finding a mission, finding a passion, and just pouring yourself into it, just letting the one thing teach you everything. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. For me, that's been kind of the, I guess, two things, but they're very similar. And that's the practice of meditation and the martial art journey. I really poured myself into those in my middle to late 20s. And I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot about a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. If someone's listening right now and maybe they've dabbled a little bit into meditation, but they haven't quite gotten a practice down, whether they're a man or a woman, where do you recommend people start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one I'm often asked. And it pains me when I hear people say things like, I tried meditation once or twice, and it's not really for me.
Yeah.
Like, well, you know what? I did a set of bench press once, and
Yeah. I didn't get jacked.
Yeah.
So.
It didn't work. I ate a
Not
salad
really my
once
thing.
and I'm still overweight. Weird.
Yeah. It's like saying I am the one human mind in this wisdom stream that's been passed heart to heart, mind to mind, unbroken for thousands and thousands of years. I'm the one human mind that doesn't really work for it. So it's also unfortunate, I think, when people are exposed to teachers who present themselves as meditation teachers who do not have a very deep practice, which unfortunately is the norm. Meditation is such a loosely defined term. It means so many different things to so many different people that it means nothing to anybody, really. I encounter people who say, yeah, I meditate. I've been meditating for years. And then they tell me about their problems. And I wonder, what does meditate mean to you? What have you been doing? You could see the same thing with regard to exercise. You could see somebody who's terribly deconditioned who says, well, yeah, I go to the gym 4 days a week and have for the past 7 years. Well, what do you do at the gym? Because it's not working. So like I said earlier, I've had the supreme good fortune, and I say this all the time, but the more I say it, the more I recognize how fucking lucky I am that I just happen to encounter really good teachers, like right off the bat. And that's not the norm. That's just not the norm. But my primary influences in the realm of meditation have been George Haas, Shinzen Young, and the late, great Dan Brown, who recently passed away. But all of these men presented meditation as an enlightenment-based approach to meditation. They are of the opinion that enlightenment is attainable in this lifetime if you go for it. And they'll define enlightenment as the capacity to have a non-dual experience. Initially, very sporadically, but with continued practice, you can stabilize that experience. And they will teach you the skills required to get there. It's a skill-based approach. Shinzen defines it as 3 primary skills: concentration, clarity, and equanimity. And like any skill, they take practice to develop, and you can do that. So again, it's not sitting down and zoning out on some kumbaya stuff. It's really wrangling your mind and training your attention with the same diligence and discipline that would be required to train a puppy who wants to run away. So to answer your question, where to begin? Establish concentration. Concentration is the foundational skill upon which all meditative skills and all meditative practices are built. And concentration is the staying power of mind. It's the capacity to direct the mind toward a specific object and have it stay there. And here's what you're going to encounter when you try to establish concentration. You're going to guide the mind toward the object of concentration. Let's say it's the breath. And then exactly 3.2 seconds later, you're going to be thinking about what's for lunch, or I think you said that to me, or whatever. And then you notice that happened and you come back. And that's the practice. That's the path. noticing that the mind has wandered and guiding it back to the object of concentration. And in time, the mind wanders less and stays more. And you start to have this feeling that you are less the content of your mind and more the steward of your mind. And that is very empowering.
Yeah,
you can pull on that thread for the rest of your life.
Yeah, almost like I remember when I first was learning about meditation, and I forget who it was, but they were leading through a guided meditation, which was helpful for me just getting started because I didn't know where to start. And so there were these, 10 to 12 minute recordings on an app that I was using, very elementary, but it was helpful to me in that moment of my life. And I remember the woman challenging me as the listener to not watch my thoughts, but observe myself being the watcher of my thoughts. So understanding that there is it's almost like a separate being inside of ourselves or consciousness that can observe ourselves having an experience. So what is that being inside of me that's aware that I'm watching my thoughts? And that whole concept was just so different than anything that I have ever, knew about thinking and meditation or, concentration or anything like that. And it's almost like this feeling. I remember having this feeling, and I still have it sometimes when I sit down to just be still, is oh, okay, there I am. Not my thoughts, the observer of the thoughts. Oh, there I am. That's my consciousness, separate from my thoughts, which I think is similar to what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, and you can keep pulling on that thread. Who's observing? Who's making the commentary on the observer? And you can, through the practice, through developing high concentration, different kinds of questions arise, and some of them hit like a Mack truck that you don't have an answer for verbally, but an insight arises that doesn't come through words, but it's just like a
yeah.
All of a sudden your perspective shifts just a little bit, and you can't even really articulate it. You just understood something fundamental about the human experience, and now that lives inside of you. And that's the fruit of meditation practice. But it's not an addition. There's no additional knowledge. It's really subtraction of what you think you know.
I was going to say, we're in 2023, we are people in a culture equivalent to the person who's thrown a medicine ball for the first time and they catch it and it hits them and it falls off their body. And you could easily just throw the medicine ball exercise away and be like, that was horrible. That was a terrible experience. I have no ability or capacity to be able to handle this thing of weight. But slowly but surely, you start to build. You might be sore for a while, in the same way that your thoughts might. If you sit there and you're trying to meditate and they're all over the place, you might be sore for a while. You may not even be able to hold the ball for 5 seconds. But slowly and surely, with consistency and ritual and routine, you're holding the ball. You're now throwing it back. You're able to catch it dynamically, and all of a sudden, it's more than just being oh, I'm able to do these things a bit more. It's wow, I feel good. I actually have the capacity to handle this and to be agile with this, so much so that I can do it over a course of time and feel good, actually feel vital. And that is the mental, spiritual muscle that we have as a just deficiency, human wide, worldwide.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to myself here too, because I'll work my ass off physically. And to sit for 15 minutes sometimes sounds like the larger mountain to climb and be still.
And that's something that very point is something that I'll pose to a lot of the men that I work with. Sometimes, we foster discipline and we become comfortable doing hard things. So for you, maybe getting to the gym is not maybe there was a time on your path where that took some heroic discipline to get yourself to do it. But now it's this is actually like this.
Yeah.
And so growth happens on the other side of the challenging thing. And so for a lot of the guys I work with, they have a fitness background. So there's not really a lot of, it's not to say that they should stop working out, but there's not there's not going to be a lot of major up levels that come from working out. Working in becomes the edge. And to your great analogy with the medicine ball, it's like when you go to the gym and you build strength, you get stronger in the gym, and then you leave, you stay strong. You're strong when you leave the gym. But in the meditation practice, the skills that we cultivate on the pillow, we get to keep when the bell rings. So the goal is not to become really like a great meditator, it's to become a great human being. Concentration is the fundamental skill that leads to performance excellence in all endeavors. So as you can cultivate the skill of concentration, you will get better at everything that you do. Husband, father, coach, entrepreneur, every hat that you wear, you'll be better at it if you train the common denominator in all your roles, your mind.
Is that because you think, like, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, the sort of mechanism of action that trickles out into almost every aspect of life as you're speaking? Like, is it the act of being able to self-reflect when you want to say something, or when you're triggered in relationship, but you've had this practice of self-reflecting, and instead of saying something hurtful to your partner, even though you feel like it, now you've practiced the self-reflection and like, okay, let me dig into that for myself first before I respond to my partner. Like, what is the mechanism of action, if you could maybe try to define it?
That would be one of them. My teacher Shinzen would always say, we have 0.3 of a second before the terrorists take the building, meaning that in a moment of high trigger, emotions are high. I mean, have you ever said something you immediately regretted saying?
Yes, of course.
Because our hands are not on the button. We have to press that veto button, and we only have 0.3 of a second to do it. That takes an enormous amount of mindfulness. And if you're not training it, then you're just on autopilot. Another mechanism of action is a sub-skill of concentration, which we could call metacognition, the capacity to mentalize or to notice what you're thinking about. So have you ever thought your way into a terrible feeling? Have you ever removed yourself totally from the conditions of the present moment and created a doomsday scenario that has nothing to do with reality? But to the intelligence of your body, the emotional experience is the same as if it were happening. What if you could stop doing that altogether?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I'm like classic for like creating confrontations and arguments in my head that actually haven't happened. Like, this is what I'm gonna say when I get to them, or when we do this.
Or you're having the conversation and you're also saying what the other person is saying, and
right. And
it's actually crazy.
It is.
In the Buddha's view, the normal person is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we've all been on the subway or something where there's that person like, well, why don't you shut up or I'll kill you? Yeah. We all know, like, okay, you're crazy. But the only difference between them and us is that they're saying it out loud and we're saying it inside of our heads.
Totally. That's so true.
Yeah.
So through metacognition, you can start to recognize how you're creating your own suffering, and you can prevent the mind from doing that. You can incline the mind toward positivity. You can gain clarity on a purpose or an intention and allow that to be your guiding force rather than your own thought. Thought becomes much less personal. So the ways that the practice ripples out are really innumerable, and they all just kind of happen gradually. Like, let's take something super mundane. You're sitting on the pillow. You got a 12-minute, 15-minute meditation practice. You're wanting to just sit still and feel, but your nose is itchy. But you're a good yogi and you don't scratch it. And you notice that actually the itch goes away. So you just had a profound insight into impermanence. There was a feeling. You regarded that feeling as unpleasant and you wanted to do something about it, but you just stayed with it as it is. You allowed reality to be the way reality is, and you just bent yourself around it without needing it to be different. And then you gained an insight that passed, and I'm still here. That's so mundane, but it's so profound. And this is the way the practice just kind of teaches you about you. And it's just get quiet and sit for 10 minutes every day. That'll change your life.
Yeah. I love that. And framing it that way makes it reachable for anyone and everyone. I feel like you don't need 2 hours of complete stillness to have it truly change your life. Consistency, I think, is important. And maybe you could speak to that. Like, should we be doing this every single day? Obviously, that seems like it would be ideal, but like, is this one of those times where any minute, any amount of minutes that you can do, that you can commit to, is better than the alternative?
Yes. Great points. So consistency is critical. I think also having a relationship with a teacher rather than an app is probably pretty good idea. I mean, if you really want to make progress on the path, you would want to reach out to somebody who is a little further along than you, but not so far along that you don't know what they're even talking about anymore. They can see that and make suggestions around your practice. But we could define formal meditation practice as bringing the totality of your attentional resources to a given technique or sensory phenomena. And that does not imply that you need to be sitting on a meditation pillow in full lotus. I mean, nowadays, if you just don't have your phone on you, you're basically a monastic. A great way in, for me, is I'll suggest people create no phone zones in your daily life. I live in Venice Beach. I take walks every day. I go to the beach often. Beach is a strict no phone zone.
That's so great.
The gym is a strict no phone zone. So anytime you don't have that external mind on you that's going to give you something to do, something to think about, it's basically a pacifier for adults, then you're with yourself. And that's a great way to start.
Oh, I love that.
It's so good.
If you could do that for, let's say, 10 minutes a day. Now, if you really want to get a taste for what's possible in meditation and build some momentum, a retreat practice, going on a retreat, I think is a really good idea. I've done a number of retreats varying in length. From the first retreat I ever did was 3 days. And at the time that felt like a insane thing to do. Like literally, I thought I lost my shit. I moved from Philly to LA, and I was practicing meditation with a teacher. He was offering a retreat at Joshua Tree. I went out to the desert for 3 days, and I thought I was like, wow, I've become a hippie. I can't ever tell my boys from Philly about this. The retreat itself was not remarkable and not at all enjoyable. It was hard and boring, and I hated mostly every second of it. But on the other side of it, as I got back to my life, I couldn't deny that there was this spaciousness. There was more space between me and my internal mental commentary that I had just accepted as self for my whole life. And it was significant enough to make me want to go on another meditation retreat for a little longer. And then, over the years, I've gone on meditation retreats once or twice a year, pretty consistently. The longest one was 4 weeks, but
wow,
a retreat practice is definitely a good way to get the ball rolling.
Yeah. That the amount of times that I've said, wow, I could never tell somebody back home about this. Too many to count for me in my life. That's so great. So I'm thinking about two, archetypes, male archetypes. We've got coming off of the commune, it's Hakuna Matata, very integrated with their feminine, who comes to you and says like, hey, I want to be a part of this program. I want to get involved with some of the things you're doing. So how do you approach them? And then the other version would be, let's say it's a CrossFit Games athlete and they've been in the gym like 24 hours a day for a decade and they're jacked out of their freaking mind, but can't sit still for 5 seconds. So you got these two male archetypes walking in and they're saying, hey, give me some help. I need to be a little bit more integrated. How do you approach this?
That's a great question, man. And that's one I might call too savage. The other one I might call too sane.
Yeah.
Funny enough, these are the individuals who come to the retreat experiences, and these individuals really get under each other's skin, but they both have the lessons for each other. They have the medicine for each other. So for the first individual who's very connected to his feminine, as you say, and straight off the commune, his medicine would be in identifying a purpose or a mission and cultivating a daily life around the accomplishment of that thing. To really ground his spirituality into his body and into his purpose, to get clarity on what it is that he's about, really, what is it that he stands for, and to develop a daily life that communicates that without him needing to say anything, or maybe not relying on his clothing to communicate his beliefs. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And maybe for an individual like that, a combative martial art or a weight training or something to really start to feel the strength in his body and to recognize that strength is good. It's not toxic, it's not harmful, but actually the people in your life who love you and who need you need to feel that strength. And maybe occasionally you'll need to be firm or even raise your voice, and you can do that while maintaining a connection to your heart. That's what we need from you, more savage. And the other individual would be encouraged to soften, really, to take his eyes momentarily off the prize, off the finish line, off the destination, and to have a look around, to intentionally relax his body, not as a concept, but as a direct momentary practice, to relax. How would you feel right now in this moment if you achieve the thing that you're moving toward? How would you feel? Invite that feeling in, to reflect upon the possibility that actually the ultimate expression of savagery is to open your heart right now, is to entertain the notion that you are always practicing something and your strength is your diligence. But what are you practicing moment by moment by moment by moment? What feeling state are you practicing? And if you want to become a real savage, become a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is so savage that they are practicing moment by moment the capacity to be medicine for all beings. So the surface level, and I'm learning this as I go, Savage and Saint is teaching me. But the surface level is, here I am, Michael Holt, I teach meditation, I teach martial art. Martial art is savage, meditation is saint. But that ain't it, Look at a yogi, a realized yogi, a deep and profound meditator who has become a bodhisattva. They've basically annihilated themselves through high states of concentration. And now they live in service of all sentient beings with no regard for their own self-interest. What could be more savage than that? That's the ultimate, that's the pinnacle of savagery. And then if you let's look at a martial artist, or my teacher, Guru Dhananasanto, who would say, I don't train because I hate the man across from me. I train because I love the people behind me. So what if your motivator in becoming skilled in the application of violence is to protect your loved ones and to protect people generally? That's pretty saintly. So it's like the yin yang symbol, the savage hides within the saint hides within the savage. They are one and the same, and you can invite them both inside one body, your body.
I know you mentioned you have a course right now, and it's centered around helping men restore vitality. I want to dive a little bit deeper into vitality specifically. I think when we talk about vitality, it's sort of a loose definition, kind of like an umbrella term. If you could define what you mean by vitality before we move into other questions around it, I think that would be helpful for people.
Yeah, I would say physical health, the palpable sense of liveliness emanating from the body, sexual virility and sovereignty, and capacity for critical thinking.
Yeah, great. Cool. What are some normalized structures and practices in society that crush our vitality? And of course, speak to men specifically if you want, but I'm sure a lot of what you're going to say is just going to apply to men, both men and women. But what are some normalized practices that crushes that?
I mean, it would probably be easier to list
What doesn't?
Like modern society generally. I'll often say if I was an evil genius who was hamstringed by the Geneva Convention and I couldn't actually chop dudes' dicks off, then I would just build this modern society in which they are castrating themselves. Where do we begin? Food, water, the general lifestyle of just being completely sedentary. Give them bread and circuses, sports games, and being completely disconnected from the dirt and the earth. The whole modern society is really built to disconnect a man from his vitality and virility, because a man who is disconnected from his vitality and virility is easy to govern. And to govern is to manipulate, to control, to lead. So if I was in charge, I would damn sure want to make sure that there wasn't a lot of vitally, vibrantly alive men that I would have to deal with, because they would be the ones saying, yo, but what the fuck you think you're doing?
Yeah.
So I would do everything I can to make sure that those men don't exist. And that's modern society.
Yeah. We've talked about the benefit of these practices like physical activity and movement, as well as mindfulness and meditation. These are delayed gratification muscles that can be built and understood, which is the complete opposite of an instant gratification culture, where if I'm not happy now, something's wrong, and there's a million alternatives that will seemingly fill the void for now, but it's going to take 2 of them tomorrow, 3 of them the next day, and it's going to exponentially increase in order to fill the void. If you never nurture this ability to understand the feedback loop of delayed gratification, of what it means to be satiated instead of consistently chasing the pleasure rush of the whether it be food or the porn or the technology, if you can't get through that instant gratification addiction, you'll never really be able to be vital.
Wisdom is the capacity to delay short-term pleasure for long-term satisfaction. So to be vital, you need to become wise.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's sometimes discouraging for me. I'll speak for myself, but obviously we have this podcast, we're on YouTube, we're creating content. We of course want people to listen to the show and to be interested in the guests that we're talking to. And you look at some of these like growth accounts or growth advice in the space of specifically like podcasting, and they're telling people like you have under 3 seconds to get the person's attention before they move to something else. And I can't argue with where reality is at right now for people and attention spans, but it's so disheartening to me as or for both of us, I'm sure, but like as a creator, you then have to it's like against everything that we're talking about on this podcast right now and every other podcast, where it's like delayed gratification and leaning in and, just being still and putting your phone to the side. It's like, it's so against what we actually teach. Yet to grow our business, to grow the podcast, we're being encouraged to lean into the fact that people have extremely short attention spans. It's like, it like hurts my heart.
Yeah, it's true. But I guess, there's a greater intention to help people out. So you can play the game, capture the attention, and then maybe give them an idea that they haven't considered before. And I can relate to that too. It's like, I'm teaching this course now. We're coming up on week 7 out of a 12-week course. And I'm continually telling the guys, there's no revolutionary information in this class. You're going to learn things that you probably already know. Everybody knows that meditation is good. Everybody knows that functional breathing is ideal, and you probably don't breathe functionally. I mean, most people anyway, at least in the health and wellness echo chamber that I live in. So meditation, breath, everybody knows that sleep hygiene is critical. Everybody knows that you need enough H2O. Everybody knows that you need to eat well, and everybody knows that you need to move. But why don't you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So the question becomes, if I know this stuff, why aren't I doing it? That can be a destabilizing question. Mm-hmm. Why aren't I taking good care of myself?
Yeah. Well, I think this is actually will lead nicely into men's work And so I think what gets lost in a world of really being able to isolate and have alternatives for pleasure and feel good at our fingertips 2 seconds away is that we lose community and the accountability that comes with a healthy, thriving community. When there are a group of individuals large enough but not too large that can look each other in the eyes and say, I'm committing, and then also I'm committing to myself and I'm committing to holding you accountable. You are incentivized and healthy pressurized to choose those seemingly harder things. And in my little exposure to men's work, I see that being one of the most beneficial elements. How are you facilitating through your leadership around men's work and men's spaces, this idea of community and accountability that would add as this sort of invisible hand of guidance through some of those I don't really feel like doing this today feelings?
Yeah, accountability is big, which you mentioned. It's one thing to try to get yourself in order on your own and set some goals, and maybe if you fall short of them, you've let yourself down or betrayed your own word, which is a big deal, but it's not as big a deal as if you told 35 other guys that you're going to do something, and one of them is actually checking on you regularly, and we're going to ask you if you got it done. It's like, well, fuck, I don't want to do this at all, but I told the guys I'd do it, so it's going to get done. And then the habit gets built.
Yeah.
So accountability is huge. That's a central component of men's work. Another thing is when a group of guys get together and summon the courage to be authentic about their lived experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everyone who's listening realizes that our struggles are more or less universal. If you're trying to do it all by yourself, there's this illusion that you are living in this house with all these problems and everyone else is out there joyfully frolicking through life with everything figured out. But when you realize that, a lot of your problems are shared, then it's like, there's a relief there. Like, I'm not the only one. And actually, I'm doing a little bit better than he is, but I'm not doing as good as he is. So you find yourself to be a link in the chain, and there's somebody available to help you out, and then there's somebody available that you can help out. And both of those things are medicinal. So it's definitely a quickening happens to your own growth when you take that task on in the presence of other men who are committed to their own growth. Another great kind of aspect that you can find in men's work, specifically in the men's work that I facilitate, and I'm big on this, is critical feedback. In polite society, the way that an individual shows up, everybody might be making conclusions or have ideas about this individual based on his posture, let's say. But nobody's going to tell him. I'm finding it difficult to trust you at a deep level that I can't really articulate because you have a forward head lean and your shoulders are slumped forward. No one's ever going to say that.
Yeah, so true.
You say, what are you weird? And furthermore, most people don't even know that that's why they don't trust them.
True.
But when you invite criticism, and criticism that comes from the heart, I love you and I respect you. And because I love you and I respect you, and because I'm courageous, I'm going to tell you something that you may not want to hear, but you need to hear. And that's a gift.
It's a gift.
Somebody tells you the thing that everybody always thought about you your whole life, but nobody told you. You have an insight into yourself and you can change, and you start to have this insight. Wow, the way I show up, my presence speaks volumes about who I am, and I can be more intentional with that. So typical of men, I think, is that we grow really through criticism more so than praise. I mean, any man can look back on like the coach that he had as a youngster who never, ever gave him a pat on the back, but was very critical, but would very occasionally say, good job, Holt. And it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it meant more.
It meant so much more because he was criticizing you. So that criticism attached to the heart, I think, is another really potent medicine of men's work.
It exfoliates the bullshit and it is a filter for narcissism. Like, I've been in the workplace for now 10 years of my career, and it's the polite society workplace. Sure, there's performance evals that are done digitally every quarter that passive aggressively get their way to the individuals, but there isn't honest, direct feedback from a place of love. And the people who are passive will get stomped on by narcissists because there's an inability to hold them accountable and to put the filtering system in that environment such that they can get the feedback sooner rather than later that there's something they need to work on. But at a certain point, if they don't, it's almost too far gone. And you have these individuals, unfortunately, thriving to the top that are complete narcissists. And it's absolutely deteriorating these different spaces of the world that we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that, like, on a retreat experience, let's say, we'll all make the collective agreement that I want to know the truth. Raise your hand if you want to know the truth about yourself, even if it's going to sting a little bit. Yeah. And so that's the collective agreement that we'll make. And it's very powerful, very valuable.
You see this with young boys, distinct from young girls. Most girl groups don't engage in this way, and we've talked about this before. But you look at a group of 17, 18-year-old high school athletes. You just observe them. There's probably going to be some poking and some nudging and some like, oh, dude, you did this, or like you did that, or like pointing out your friend's weaknesses, but you're still friends after it. Girls don't do that as much. I did not do that in my friend group. Like, girls take it, I know I'm speaking generally, this was my experience and what I observe. I feel like I have to give a disclaimer all the time, but I think it's innate in men to nudge and to poke when you see something breaking down. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like I've heard other teachers speak to this specifically in men, because you're looking for the weak points, because potentially, 400 years ago, you could have this guy next to you in battle or on a hunt, and you need to know, like, can you handle yourself? And so there's this like poking where it's like, hey, where are your weak spots? I'm going to find them, and like, we're going to be cool afterwards. But like, we rely on each other for that agreed upon poking for your benefit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say that's a fundamental difference between men and women, is that men typically grow more through criticism and women more through praise. But I know, speaking from my own experience, like, the guys that I have in my inner circle that I really want around are guys who give me good criticism. I've had the experience of individuals being very complimentary toward me, and it's just like, it's cool, it's nice, but it's not growing me.
It's like, you're bullshitting me.
Yeah.
Or whatever, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
But if I can and I have good friends who can give me good criticism, and not just like insulting, but like profound, subtle, nuanced information about me, the way I might be seeing something and what I'm missing and why I fucked that up. I'm just like, I love you, man. You stay by my side. Because not only do you have the depth to see that, you have the balls to tell me. And that's the kind of people that I want around me.
Yeah, I think that's so vital for anyone to be able to have people around you that sharpen you and that are willing to be courageous in those moments. And it's something that we can all certainly lean into and learn from.
Yeah, I mean, look for the people who are pointing out your loops and your patterns that you're repeating. Those are people who look beyond just the surface and care about you enough to point out, like, hey, you're doing that thing again. And you did that 5 years ago at your last job, where you've turned yourself into the victim. And now it sounds like really similar themes are coming up in your new job environment, or something along those lines. Or a lot of times it's the survival archetypes that we as adults consistently start to groom our environments. Like, where are you selling yourself short? Where are you self-sabotaging because you're afraid of failure? Where have you pivoted yourself into victimhood because of, the only value that you can attain from something is by renegotiating the environment in a way that makes you the victim? And so having individuals in your council or of friends or just community that can see those, they know the true version of you and your potential and will speak to it, is so wildly valuable to have in your life. And again, it comes back to this recurring theme of get away from your screen for a minute, because you may not be able to have that level of authenticity in relationship digitally or virtually.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bit of a cheat code, isn't it, Chase, to have people around you who see you that way. And you must also humble yourself and be the kind of person who invites that kind of criticism.
Yeah.
There's definitely an art to delivering criticism, and there's an art to receiving it too. And both take practice.
Mm-hmm.
To your point about getting off the screen, one of the things we'll do in a retreat, I could tell you everything that we do over the course of a 3-day workshop, but to hear it said would probably just sound weird, and it would not even come close to describing what's actually going on while the thing is happening. So, for example, there's a lot of extended gazing, and to your point about getting away from the screen, if you really just stop, get still, look into somebody's eyes, the depth of information available about that person that is just communicated in that moment of connection. It might be somebody that you never even met before, and will say something like, tell this man his greatest strength. And you'll say it. You won't think it. You'll just speak it from your gut. And the guy will say, he'll cry.
Yeah.
True. Tell this man his deepest weakness or his deepest wound. And that's true too. It's like when you practice, I always say the human body is the most highly biologically attuned instrument in the known universe. The amount of information that this thing can glean from its environment is extraordinary, as long as you don't fuck it up. And to your earlier point, Mimi, about modern culture fucks it up. So if you would want to be vital, you need to remove yourself from the norms and trends of modern society and do things that most people don't do, and not do things that most people do. But what you find if you do that is that you become an outlier, and you awaken extraordinary abilities. Extraordinary. So ordinary that they're just basic, but they're just covered up by the modern lifestyle. But, these intuitive capacities can come back online to anybody who lives in a way that's in harmony with the way that we're meant to be living.
Well, you mentioned a couple. No phone zone, I think, is one that we can all start employing today. And we do that already, go for a walk. I leave my phone. I tell Chase, I'm leaving my phone, on purpose. And I think that that's really valuable. It allows us to be in our body and to flirt with nature and to receive the flirts with nature, and to engage and to kind of be embodied in your senses. What are you hearing? Like, where's the birds that's trying to flirt with you? The flowers that are trying to get your attention, the smell of grass. Like, you don't notice those things if you're, scrolling on your phone as you're walking. You may be getting the steps, you may be getting the sunshine, but you're not fully alive and awake and present in your own experience. So I think that that's a huge one that's probably overlooked and underestimated by a lot of people. So no phone zone. On this thread of, you're going to have to probably lean into some things that might make you an outlier. Can you speak to any more of those things? Obviously, meditation, that you employ in your life that maybe someone else who's listening can start doing.
Yeah, well, I know this seems super basic to you both and in the echo chambers that we live in, but for most people, to just eat real food and only eat real food is like crazy, but you can't imagine how much richer your felt sense of the body will become if you give it food that speaks in a language that it can actually understand. And you do that for an extended amount of time. It's like, like I said, we're 7 weeks into this 12-week course and we haven't even gotten to food yet, but we're about to. But yeah, that's like, just give yourself a 14-day challenge where you don't eat anything that would confuse the caveman. And notice how every physiological, measure improves. Take a walk at the morning sunrise and take a walk with the sunset. Like we said earlier, don't bring your phone. Sit still for 5 minutes every day. Take a cold shower. The cures are so simple.
Mm-hmm.
The profundity of them is actually doing them with consistency and collectively. Someone's listening. If you would do these things for the next 30 days, you would be amazed at how your life would change. Get up 30 minutes before the sun rises and be outside for the sunrise. Come home and take a cold shower for 3 minutes. Then take 15 deep breaths, the deepest breaths you can possibly take. Just 15. Then just sit there for 10 minutes. For the rest of the day, only eat real food. You can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. If you're hungry, eat. If you're not hungry, don't eat, but eat real food. When the sun sets, take a walk midday and maybe a light jog, like, jog 10 yards and then walk and then jog 10 yards, if you feel like it. Come home, have another real meal. When the sun sets, take another walk. Get in bed relatively early. Do that every day for 30 days, report back. Notice how many of your problems go away.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, I hope people are like taking notes because like what you said, there's nothing like overly complicated in there.
No, like I said, it's so simple. It's all so simple. Health has been made so complicated. Furthermore, we define health as the absence of disease. If you're not sick, that means you're healthy. No. Health is this feeling of wanting to kick your sheets off in the morning and get the job done because you're so passionate about the thing that you have to do and you have so much energy that you have to pour into it. That's health. That's vitality. And it's simple. It is so simple. It's not easy, especially in a culture where to be healthy is to be an outlier. And this is a question that I'll often ask people. How many people do you encounter on a regular basis that are really, really healthy, like turned on, vitally, vibrantly alive, vibing high? To the point where it actually leaves a bit of an impression on your body, like, holy shit, what the hell was she on?
And that's the thing is you know when you meet those people.
Oh, when you do.
You feel it.
Rare. Yeah.
And you're like attempting to articulate and they're like, they're just really fucking healthy. They're glowing,
Now, how many people do you encounter who are walking around half dead, breathing through their mouth, that can barely formulate a coherent thought or have a novel idea and are riddled with physical pain and emotional turbulence? That's normalized. So the question becomes, what are these people doing? Well, they're living the way we're encouraged to live in the modern culture. So don't live that way. And this is the way that I like to breathe this revolutionary spirit into my work, particularly with guys, because we need a revolution. And I'm a revolutionary individual, but the real revolution is your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
It's not the next protest. It's not to topple systems of oppression. It's your daily life. Your daily life is your revolution. What you eat for breakfast is your revolution. Your revolution is your day-to-day lived experience. So that's the real revolution. I went through a chapter in my life where I was angry. I told you I was atheist. I was anarchist. I was pissed. I wanted to fight cops and all this crazy stuff, all this anger. And then I realized, love is the revolution. Health is the revolution. So that's the revolution that I'm trying to spearhead. But it's warriors' work, it's warriors' work. So we need more warriors.
Yeah, I think people in our culture today, 300-400 years ago, they had a different type of stress in their life. They had different problems. Their problems were finding food and, moving their entire tribe before the blizzard hits. And ours now are putting my phone down and going for a walk and having that discipline, or the discipline to sit down and meditate for 10 to 15 minutes every day, or the discipline to not engage with my partner in a toxic way, to not spend hours scrolling social media. Like, these are different problems, but they require a different sort of skill set, because everything is so easy to get to. You can push 2 buttons on your phone and have food at your door in 10 minutes. Like, that is so wild. And so I love the idea of like purposefully putting ourselves in situations that are mildly discomforting, but are going to have so many downstream benefits for ourselves in this moment and for our future selves, and everything that you're talking about obviously falls under that umbrella. And I hope people are hearing the invitation and the encouragement from you. And I just speaking, directly to you, I love that you're so passionate about it. It's awesome to see, because that's what our world needs more of, is people who are sharing their passion, as Paul Chek would say, our one love, our big, overarching dream. And it's really refreshing, this tough love passion that you have.
I appreciate you saying that. And I do feel very wealthy. I feel very lucky that, I'm very fulfilled in my work. And basically, I'm earning a living doing what I would be doing anyway.
Yeah,
so,
that's great. Yeah. That's the ikigai, right?
That's it. I hit it.
Yeah. No, I'm so refreshed by what's coming from you, in the sense that we can actually make radical change just through radical self-responsibility. And instead of sitting in our armchairs and scrolling through our devices or watching television and shaking our fist expecting the authorities that be to solve our problems, it can be as simple as just getting your ass up out of the seat and leaving those devices and going for a walk, mirroring your rhythms with nature. And slowly but surely you'll change your life. People will feel the change and get curious about what you're doing and be interested enough to change theirs. And we can do this thing from the bottoms up. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to earlier around grandiose ideas for radical overnight change, is kind of the wrong way to look at it. And I'm not saying that can't happen through the Buddhas and Gandhis and Jesus Christs of the world, but there's a way that we can actually just do this from the bottoms up that's practical today. And so very refreshed and motivated to continue in this path, my man.
I appreciate you guys, man. It's been really lovely to chat with you. The next Buddha, the next Jesus, the next Ghandi may not be an individual, but a critical mass of individuals who have taken responsibility for themselves. So the question becomes, which side are you on? Which side are you on? And does your daily life reflect which side you think you're on?
Yeah. Boom. Love it. Mic drop. But I'm going to have you pick the mic back up, because we have one more question for you.
Oh shit, I broke the mic.
Actually, two. First, if you would please let people know where they can find you, links, website, the work that you're doing. Give people insight there.
Yeah, go to my website, savageandsaint.com. That's easy to remember. The best way to stay in the loop with me is you'll get a pop-up on the website that says subscribe to my newsletter. That's a newsletter that I send out once a week about just a reflection, and I'm intentionally polarizing, and I don't put a lot of thought into, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. I'm just basically putting a flag in the ground. This is what I'm about. And subscribe to the newsletter, and if you don't dig it, then unsubscribe, and that's a pretty clear indicator that we wouldn't get along, and enjoy the rest of your life. But if you dig it, then you'll be in my sphere, and you'll get information about upcoming retreats and the Masculine Vitality course. There's going to be another option to enroll in that course in July of this year. And then you can find me on social media. It's at Savage and Saint on Instagram, but that website, that link is on the savageandsaint.com.
Great. Well, last question for you, man. We ask every guest on the Medicin. We're all about exploring these alternative medicines, and we intentionally leave the E off the end of medicine because it can be the sacredness of a flower. It can be the beauty and the incredible response that your body has when it sees the morning sunrise. So we like to leave medicine very loose. But what for you really feels like medicine in your life right now?
I've done a deep dive into, I see the mushroom behind you guys. I don't know that you could name a psychedelic that I haven't experimented with, but I'm beginning to realize that the most intense psychedelic is our own breath. So if you don't believe me, take 10, 15 deep breaths, do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. See what happens.
Yep.
Yeah. Breathe in and out really fast for 30 minutes and you will be on another planet.
Yeah.
I know it. And I trip balls off every morning. I get high on my own supply.
Right, man.
Love it. Snaps for that. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us and our listeners. We really appreciate you, sharing, but also just that we get to call you friend and we get to see you at Paul Chek workshops. Holler.
Best part, man. I'm honored to call you guys friends, and thank you once again for the invitation.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, brother.
All right, you guys, go check out Savage and Saint. And if you enjoyed this episode, send it to someone that you think would also enjoy it. Help us spread the message, spread the love. We'll see you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.